Hi, today I'll be talking to Professor Cédomir Nestorovic. Professor Cédomir teaches International Marketing and Geopolitics at the ESSEC Business School here in Singapore. We'll be talking about the impact of the lockdowns on the economy and more specifically on the tourism sector here in the region, and why ASEAN has the ability to recover faster, and also importantly, the role the airlines have to play in helping recovery in the region. Welcome to crTALKS. In this series of travel readiness conversations, I'll be talking to experts, thought leaders, entrepreneurs, key stakeholders on how destinations and businesses are getting ready to resume tourism after COVID-19. Thanks for watching. I'm Fazal, your host for today. Thank you very much, Professor Cédomir. Thanks for being in the show, and thanks for your time. Of course, all of us have been at home for some time now. I, of course, want to talk a lot about the impact of COVID on the economy and the tourism sector, specifically in ASEAN. But before I get there, I wanted to sort of, know from you, how has it been in the education sector that you are so involved in? How has the COVID experience been in the education, teaching and students and things like that? Maybe a brief overview of, challenges you're facing on that.
Thank you very much. Since I am in the education sector for quite a long time, but I am in the higher education sector. So I cannot talk about secondary or primary school or kindergarten, whatever. So in the higher education, we have been talking about online teaching for quite a long time. There was a push always in order to do more on digitalization, in order to have something for students that they can access to at any time, at any place, on any device, etc. So, but it was not something that we were very fond of. But suddenly, from one day to the other, we have to adapt, and especially to adapt to Zoom. We have never used Zoom before. So we are adapting to Zoom. So now I'm teaching to my students via Zoom. And here is, let's say, a lot of good and bad things about that. Right. The very good thing is that we can address students in many jurisdictions, in many places at the same time. When I was teaching, for instance, it was 2 months ago, I was teaching to the undergrad students, and they were present in Japan, in the United States, in Lebanon, in France, in Singapore, whatever the country is. So that's a very nice thing. It is authorizing us to have sessions for people wherever they are. They don't need to travel in order to do so. So that's a very good thing. The bad thing is that we are a little bit tired of Zoom because of the attention that we have to pay on this, and we are always distracted. So you are in your home, I am in my home, but I'm not alone in my home. So since I'm not alone in my home, I may be solicited by the members of my family asking something, or the sound of the TV, which is behind me. So there are a lot of things, because it is not a professional place. We are just dedicating one room in order to work on this. But of course, it is a life. So in the life, we cannot control everything. And finally, the interesting thing is that my students, sometimes they don't switch on the camera. So I have 79, let's say, screens. Out of them, 70 are black. Or sometimes all of them are black. So that's not easy when you teach, when you have black screens everywhere. And when you ask for people, well, do you listen to me? Oh, yeah, of course we listen to you. So you hear the sound, but you cannot see them. So ask them, why don't you switch on the camera? My camera doesn't work, or I don't know, internet is not very good, or whatever. I'm suspecting that they are still in their bed. So from the bed, they are attending this. So these are the few things. There are bad and good things about that. So we had to adapt, whatever our age is. So we successfully adapted to this, but this is not something that we would like to have on a regular basis.
So you really want to go back to physical teaching?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
This is something that students are also asking for,
okay.
Because there is all this, let's say, when you teach, you also use your body language when you teach, and you engage the students. But now I cannot see them, so I cannot engage them, and they cannot also engage among themselves. It is a comprehensive experience. It is not only giving the knowledge. Otherwise, we could record everything, and in that case, they are going on the screen and they are listening to this. These are very interesting things, but it is not the essence of education. The essence of education is when you are exchanging, delivering knowledge, but also exchanging. And when you have this holistic, comprehensive education, the fact that they are going to the cafeteria together and that they're exchanging among themselves is also part of it. We cannot avoid all this. So.
Thanks, Professor. Thanks for that update. It's an interesting time, especially in the education area. So let's going to our main topic of today. I mean, the COVID has, of course, devastated the economies, employment. I mean, it's bad, but in your view, can you put some perspective to how bad it has been from ASEAN perspective, the impact of COVID on the general economy?
Okay, so of course it was being devastating. However, maybe we could not entirely blame the COVID on this. I would say that the impact on economy is not necessarily COVID, it is the lockdown, because the lockdown has stopped all the economic activity. And why did we have a lockdown? It is because for many countries, they didn't have any other option, any other alternative, rather than to have a lockdown. However, in other countries, in other jurisdictions, if, for instance, you are going to Sweden, if you are going to Portugal, if you're going to some other places, even Indonesia, how can you lock down Indonesia? You have more than 15,000 islands. So if you want to lock down, it will be a province, or it will be a municipality, or it will be part of the city, but you cannot lock down this entire country, which is an archipelago called Indonesia. So it means that lockdown has this impact. If we had another alternative, we could fight COVID without lockdowns. In that case, we can continue the economic activity, and we can even continue tourism. Now, you can just say for the people who are sick, they will be isolated, but we will continue as usual. So you are respecting the different, let's say, measures in order to prevent the spread of the disease, but you are lockdowning only people who have the disease or who have the symptoms, but not everyone. So this was the problem that I see here. And concerning ASEAN, there was a big problem here. That is the dilemma between the lives and livelihoods. So the lives means we are imposing the lockdown in order to save lives. But after a few months, what happened in the Philippines is that you are lockdowning an economy. Many people were working in the, let's say, unofficial economy. So it means that they are living from one day to the other, or from 1 week to the other. If they don't have income, it's over for them. For the others who are working in the official economy, you can have help coming from the state, or help coming from the company, or from anyone else. But for the people who are working in the streets and who are not considered to be official workers, what kind of help will they receive? Nothing. Absolutely. So it means that you must open the economy. It was the same thing in India, for instance. That is, they realized that many people depend on this, and maybe we will have more deaths because of this, and not because of the disease itself. So that's the dilemma between the lives and livelihoods.
In terms of, of course, we have now, we have so much of lockdowns, and, economies have been, impacted and all that. But what do we do now? What should countries do in order to, I mean, there's definitely going to be a massive amount of job losses generally, how do we sort of get over this and at least get some semblance of normalcy?
That's a very tough question because we can have, I would say, two options. The first one is when the state is stepping in and when the state is helping. And in many countries, they have issued these budgets. For instance, here in Singapore, we have a total of $100 billion. Can you imagine? $100 billion have been earmarked in order to help the economy to recover and that we don't lose so many jobs. However, even in Singapore for the last month, we have lost about 25,000 jobs. So for many countries, 25,000 jobs is nothing, but for Singapore, it is quite significant. So we will have the situation when people are going to lose their jobs. So either the state is helping them, either you say the market is doing this. So we don't need to help anyone. Of course, some companies will disappear. Of course, some jobs will be lost, but the market will continue to exist and people will have to readapt to something else. But I would say that the majority of countries have taken the first option. So the first option is to say that the government, in that case, the state, has to help with massive injunctions of money within the economy. So today, no one is talking about budget deficit. No one is talking about how to repay the loans. Yes. So for instance, in Europe, they're talking about $500 billion. Who will repay this? No one cares. So it means that we are engaging the future generations about that. But that's the only option that the politicians have found so far in order to help the people who are going to lose their jobs. And many of them will lose jobs.
When it comes to ASEAN, how long will it take for the economic recovery? Assuming that people, we are opening up Singapore now, Malaysia is opening up. I think the Philippines never closed. Thailand is trying to open up. Indonesia has been sort of here and there. So how do we?
I think that ASEAN will recover sooner, I would say better than Europe or let's say some other Western countries. Why so? It is because even in the past, except for Singapore, the involvement of the government was not so big. So it means that people don't expect from the government to do something for them. If they do something, that's okay, we take it. But if they don't do it, we will try to do it by ourselves. So it means that the ASEAN will be more resilient than the other countries, where in the other countries, in some small places, one plant is closing, that's the death of the small place. But here in ASEAN, people are versatile. They will move. They will go to another place in order to find a job. And this is not something that we find very often in Europe. In Europe, when, for instance, one plant is closed, so this is exactly what is happening today in the automotive industry in France. So the plant is closing, but 70 kilometers away, they're offering the possibility for you to continue to work. But people don't want. They don't want to travel 70 kilometers. In Indonesia, they will travel 1,000 kilometers away in order to find a job if necessary. So that's different from Europe or from the other parts when people are, I would say, fixed in a certain geography. But in ASEAN, this is not the case. And many people from ASEAN are also working abroad. So if you mentioned the Philippines, but we can talk about the Indonesians, we can talk about people from Myanmar, we can talk about people from even from Cambodia or from Vietnam. They're not hesitating to go somewhere in order to find a job. And that kind of mentality, I think, is better preparing them to overcome this kind of crisis.
All right. That's good to hear for ASEAN countries, I assume. They're more resilient.
They will be more resilient, that's for sure. That's for sure.
Let's talk about tourism a little bit. What's your take on, opening up tourism? Of course, we have these dangers of COVID. I mean, and, even today, I think, or yesterday, they were saying the second wave in some European, there was a German plant which had a huge problem. US, they're talking about a second wave. So with all that, how do we, because tourism is such an integral part of the economy, but how do we get this going with all this?
Exactly. So tourism is an important part of the economy, especially here in ASEAN. If I remember well, in the Philippines and in Thailand, it represents a very big part of the GDP, if not maybe the biggest part of the GDP.
20 plus.
That's right.
Yeah.
So for these two countries, it is a significant part. It is not just something that you can do about, but they must open this. So for them, the problem, I see two problems here. The first one is the airline communications. Without airline communications, we are stuck. We cannot use boats in order to go there. So in that case, if the airlines don't work, if you don't have the protocols in order to permit people, even in a bubble. So what does it mean, a bubble? It means that from your home, when you go to the airport, in the airport to the plane, from the plane to the resort, you stay in the resort and you are coming back. You don't see anything else. But in the past, we used to have this. So it is not something new. So the bubble, if you create a bubble, in that case, maybe we can arrange something like that. But without a bubble, in that case, we have to wait. And some airline companies will disappear. We will not have so many, I would say, tourist destinations on a frequency that we used to have in the past. If, for instance, at Changi, you could go to Langkawi, or you can go to Cebu, or you can go to any other place, let's say 3 times a day. Now it will not be the case. Maybe you will go there once a day or 3 times in a week. So automatically you are reducing the number of potential passengers who can go there, and the potential number of tourists who can go, because of the limiting capacity of the airline industry. And this airline industry is the first hit. As you know, Changi has lost 95% of its turnover. They have only 5% for the transit that they have to, and the people who are coming back to Singapore. But apart from this, they don't have anything, and they have stopped the terminal number 5 in order to be constructed. It has been pulled away for the moment. So I would say that we have one first problem, which is the airline industry, and the second problem will be the facilities. And many hotels also will maybe disappear because there is no turnover. They are private institutions. Everything which is linked with them, taxis, I don't know, excursions, F&B, other things that they can see, all this has been put on stop. So everyone hopes that it will bounce back when it is over, but I'm not so sure that everyone can survive. So I presume that many of them will disappear. So if you are looking at the figures, the main figures are coming from the United Nations World Tourist Organization. So the World Tourist Organization is giving the scenarios also that you have mentioned before. So we have all these kind of scenarios, but of course they are gloomy scenarios, and they have revised them practically every month negatively. So we don't have a very bright situation. I see an interesting situation concerning the domestic tourism. So the domestic tourism, especially in Vietnam, for instance, or even in the Philippines or in Thailand, will develop. And even the domestic tourism, if we are focusing on the, let's say, middle class, this middle class is also hit by a decrease in income, by losing jobs, etc. So people are not really keen to go immediately for the destinations, even domestically.
So, Prof, where do you see the industry, let's say in 2021? Do you think we will, assuming, of course, the vaccination is a key issue, I think, having the vaccination, but Is it going to look gloomy until 2022, or where do we see?
I don't think so. I think that people want to go back to normal. They also want to go back to travel. We have seen this in Europe, for instance, when they partially open something, immediately you have hundreds, thousands of people gathering. They want to be there, etc. However, because of the travel requirements, this is where we will have problems. If, for instance, we are reducing the number of flights, first thing. Second thing, if we are increasing the price of these flights, so in that case, we will not have the low-cost tourism that we used to have in the past, which was essential here in ASEAN, because you remember before the pandemic, you are taking Air Asia, you are taking Tiger Air, whatever, you are paying $50 and you are going to some place. Yep. I don't think that this will come back any soon, because you will have additional cost and you will not have the rotation as frequent as we used to have concerning this. So I presume that people still want to travel, but the problem of cost and the availability of flights will limit this. There would need not be problems concerning availability of facilities, concerning hotels, concerning restaurants, etc. But I think the main problem is the flights. If you don't have flights, in that case, we cannot go there.
Just staying on the airline industry, where do you see the airline? Because I think that's when I was talking to the CEO of Cape Town Tourism, also he was telling at the end of the day, when it comes to international travel, I mean it's key. I mean airline industry, whether the airlines are going to fly to the city is key. Your thoughts on how airline industry will come back? As some of them will disappear, some of them have to be rescued, and then I think most importantly the pricing, as you said, especially if you have to leave one seat vacant in the middle. Of course, some airlines say they don't want to do that. But it's a whole bunch of issues around the airline industry, which is so crucial to restart international travel.
Yeah, you're right, because we have here two discussions. The first discussion is about economy tickets, and the second one is business tickets. Yeah. And the business tickets were a very good source of income concerning airline companies. Now, if, for instance, because of the Zoom, we are now on Zoom, and the business people don't travel anymore, or they will travel less, automatically the booking of the business tickets will be extremely reduced. So many companies will say, why do we have a business class? Why do we have a first class? Let's put everyone in the economy, and in that case, we can distribute the different seats. So for the moment, I don't think that we have a clear situation what may happen, but I anticipate that they will look at the cost per seat or the yield per seat that they can get, and many companies will reorganize, or they will attribute the different seats within the airplane according to what they expect from this. And we have seen that many companies are now in trouble. For instance, Air France and Lufthansa, they have received the subsidies, and at the same time, they are laying out people. So I don't know how politically they will justify this, but they are playing on both sides at the same time. Hopefully, Singapore Airlines did not lay off people for the moment, but we can never be sure about what may happen in the future. So the airline company will be deeply stressed on this. And I don't think that in the 2 years to come, they can recover. They will need a little bit more time in order to recover. There would be a reorganization. Will Cathay Pacific, for instance, continue to exist without the support of Hong Kong or without the support of People's Republic of China? For the other national carriers, I can expect that the different countries will still try to subsidize them and still try to keep them. But for some others, especially private, such as Virgin or Ryanair or whatever, we are not so sure about that.
Yeah, that reminds me of during my corporate days, I was in the middle of the financial crisis. We were all flying business class at that time. After the financial crisis, the note was issued, no more business class, everybody. It was a huge change, for us, traveling for years on business class, they changed into economy. It took some time. Finally,
because we have these two pressures. Yeah. For instance, if the company is telling you you don't need to travel because you can do everything on Zoom, and at that time in 2008, for the crisis, you didn't have Zoom. So it was the only thing was to take. Yeah. So the only thing was to take a phone and to try to arrange something over the phone. But now they tell you you have Zoom. So why would you travel if you have Zoom? And if you travel, it will be economy. Yes. And in that case, you say, okay, in that case, I don't travel. Let's have Zoom because I don't want to travel in economy. True. Because of course, for the people who are not used to travel in business class, there is a perception that it is a luxury, etc. But for the business people, when you have to arrive in a good shape, etc., for the discussion, and sometimes you are coming back in the same day or just the day after, you're not going there for holidays. Yes. You're just going there just in order to set something or to have a conversation, and after that you are coming back. So but that's the perception that we have.
I remember my corporate days flying business. So you used to always, at least half the time in the plane, you can work, you can prepare for your meeting.
Exactly.
The laptop. As soon as you shift to economy, you stop that, you start watching movies because you cannot work.
Because you cannot work. You cannot work because of the number of seats that you have, and the size of the seats are not the same. So of course you cannot work. So anyway, so I would just go back to the tourism sector, which will definitely pose a problem. However, here in Asia, or especially in Southeast Asia, I think that people are used to travel, and they will go back to travel as soon as they can, meaning that we have the flights, and as soon as we have, I would say, affordable prices. Affordable flights for them, they will come back because they're used to that.
People want to travel.
If it was 50 years ago, I would say, no, you have to think. I see my students here. They're just waiting for the weekends, and every weekend they are somewhere. They're going to the Philippines, they're going to Indonesia, they're going to Myanmar, whatever the place. But they don't go, let's say, more than 4 or 5 hours.
That's right.
That's the limit. Perfect. So they want to stay, that's up to India. And they want to stay within this area that is within Southeast Asia. And they like to go there, and they're going there every weekend, provided that we have there's good flights and frequency of flights, because they're going for the weekend. Yeah. So it means that they have classes on Friday afternoon. After that, they are going to Changi, and they have to come back by Sunday night. So the frequency must be good enough, otherwise they cannot go for the weekend.
Well, another subject, or slightly different subject, Professor, in terms of the, at the ASEAN level, is there, what should, at an ASEAN, pan-ASEAN level, that ASEAN countries could do to sort of both reinvigorate the economy and also the tourism sector?
So I think that concerning the economy, they have to insist that the supply chains that we used to have, which are the global supply chains, continue to exist. And for instance, Singapore is very much dependent on international trade, and especially on supply chains. So they have to insist and to persuade the Europeans and the Americans that they can continue to be in Southeast Asia, and that the supply chains in Southeast Asia are resilient. And whatever the outcome of the US-China tariff war, etc., ASEAN is another story. And ASEAN is here to stay, and they can continue to work with ASEAN countries. I think this is the most important thing for them, because many of these countries here in ASEAN depend on orders, corporate orders coming from Europe or coming from America. So they must continue this with Japanese, with the Koreans, with Americans, etc. They must continue with this. Now, when it comes to the tourist industry, I would say two things. The first one is short term, the second one is long term. For the short term, as we have indicated before, if there is no vaccine, we have to invent something. So I think that there's a bubble tourism is a necessity for the time being. Like Zoom is a necessity for us, this bubble tourism will also be a necessity. If necessary, you will ask people to have a certificate, that is a testing, before going to some place. They don't move out of this place. They stay on this beach. They can go only to this place. Of course, it is not something which is pleasant, because you would like to have freedom to move around, etc. But it's better than nothing. So if the security is something which is important, why to lock down everything? We can try to imagine to open up some elements with, of course, respecting some kind of security, health security, but please don't lock down everything, because if you lock down everything, in that case, everyone is losing. So maybe this bubble tourism will be better. And when all this is over, in that case, we have to go back, maybe not to the normal thing that we used to have before. I expect fewer tourists coming from, let's say, Middle East, or coming from Europe, or coming from Americas, because I think that for a certain number of years, people will be afraid to travel long distance. They would be interested either in domestic tourism or short distance, but not the long one. So I think that ASEAN has to promote a little bit more intra-ASEAN tourism rather than to, and adding, of course, Japan, Korea, and China, but not to focus very much on America and on Europe for, let's say, medium term.
In terms of, just slightly on the consumer part, you think, of course, there's this, everybody talks about, after 9/11, we got used to so many, on the security front and things like that.
Yes.
Are we, what will be the new normal of travel, both from a technology point of view, plus probably behavior point of view, is it going to radically change, or are we going to just go back to where we were?
I think that there would be some changes, at least at the beginning. People will be more, I would say, more interested in keeping health distance. They will look at the other people. They will scrutinize the other people. If the other people are safe, who is sitting by the next seat in the airplane, etc. They will try to clean everything. So I think that at the beginning, they will pay attention to this. Only a very few will not do so, but the great majority will pay attention, and they will respect the health measures which are implemented even today by the airline companies. On the long term, no. On the long term, they will forget, because, as you know, human beings, they tend to they tend to forget as soon as there is a vaccine. And if we have a vaccine for the next year, in that case, we are lifting all these things. But people will get used to the mask. Yes. Here in Asia, we have been used to the mask, especially if you're going to Japan or Korea. You could find masks everywhere, even when there was not a pandemic. But today, I think that some people will continue to wear masks for years. Because they are afraid about what is going on. Of course, even if they are safe by themselves, they don't know who are the other people. So they will try to prevent this kind of thing. And if you wear the mask, all the entertainment industry, all the, sometimes even F&B, even on the resort, this will have some influence. But I don't think that it will be a very big influence. They will just wear the mask.
All right. just, I know you're not a health expert, Professor. What do you think about the vaccine? When will we all have vaccine?
For the vaccine, we have, as you know, there are some people who are against the vaccine.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They're against the vaccine because of the conspiracy theories.
All right, okay.
And one very famous conspiracy theory is that you are taking the advantage of the vaccine in order to add something else.
All right.
And
okay.
I remember this situation. It was in the 50s and in the 60s. In some countries, they were fearing that the vaccine, let's say against polio or against some other diseases, were in fact anti-fertility vaccines.
Right.
So some people were reluctant to take these vaccines because they were supposing that the government is doing something against them, etc., etc. So there are people who are against the vaccines because they don't know what is inside and they don't want to do this. But the great majority, of course, will accept because this will be the only way how we can travel and how we can engage with the other persons. I read some papers about the vaccine business because this is a huge business. Who is going to be the first to propose a vaccine? And is this vaccine a common good, or is this vaccine as any other product on the market?
Right.
And if it is any product on the market, in that case, you can price it very high in order to reap the return on investment immediately. If it is a common good, who is going to invest in this? So many countries have decided to invest in this because they expect that it will be a common good. But you also have private companies which are on the market, and for them it is not a public good. For them it is a source of profits. So we'll see who is going to be the first one to launch this. And on top of this, when you have the vaccine, obviously you will not have billions of shots concerning this vaccine. So there would be a question of prioritization, and it will be a messy thing. Who will be the first to get the vaccine? And you know that some countries have already fought for the masks.
Yes.
In order to be the first to get the mask. So you can imagine what will happen for the vaccine.
Vaccine, absolutely. Yeah,
unfortunately, I expect that there would be some messy thing about the vaccines as well.
Thanks, Professor. I think we covered quite a lot. Just one last thing. Are we just crystal balling here? Taking into account vaccine, that and this. When do you think? How long will it take for the tourism industry in ASEAN, particularly, to get back to the levels of 2019, for instance? Are we looking at 2022, 2023, 24?
So if we have a vaccine, let's say the vaccine is by the beginning of next year. So in that case, we are at the beginning of 21. I expect that we can return to the same level in about maybe 1 to 2 years time, provided again that we will have enough flights and that the price of the flights will be affordable. Yeah, and as you know, intra-ASEAN is very much low cost.
Yes.
It is not a full cost. It is not business travel. We have them, but the great majority is low cost. So in that case, we are talking about the economy class, or we are talking about the low cost companies. And for them, the price sensitivity is extremely high. So if the vaccine is there, if the price is there, boom, it will go back immediately.
Thank you very much, Professor. It was thanks for your time. We learned a lot, and we hope to have a chat with you again sometime later. Thank you very much.
It is my pleasure, Fazal. So anytime. We have cooperated many times in the past. It will be my pleasure to cooperate in the future as well.
Thank you very much. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for watching CR Talks. In the next episodes, we will be talking to more travel industry stakeholders on how they are overcoming challenges to rebuild the travel industry. So join us on our next episodes. Until then, goodbye.